I gotta say, watching how local law enforcement and the powers that be that are supposed to protect us, how they were adamant about calling what happened to the CEO of United, how they talked about that as a act of terror versus how long it took them to call this tragedy that happened in New Orleans a terrorist attack. There is only one thing separating it, and it is capital. Let's talk about it.
Y'all already know what time it is. I got the black V-neck
on. What is going on, you all? I just find it very weird, but not weird, of the conversation around the CEO being unalived and the tragedy that happened in New Orleans. It's just really a reminder of what is important, what is the end goal at the end of the day. And just seeing how long it took for law enforcement to call what happened in New Orleans a terrorist attack or an act of terror, they did not want to call it that. And the reasons why they did not want to call it that is because they want to protect capital. The Sugar Bowl is happening in the next couple of days in New Orleans, and we have the Super Bowl happening in February. And they do not want anything to mess up any money, any coin coming in. They are not interested in that. They do not want to scare the masses, especially when it's going to be costing them money. Costing them money is going to have them changing the quote unquote definition of terror. They're calling it now, but there was pushback. They did not want to call it that. They were waiting on information and things, but immediately seeing what happened, that was an act of terror. And finding out that the person who has ran into the crowd having a flag on the back of their truck, they had an agenda. And, normally we would see, them calling it for what it was, but the powers that be do not want to lose out on any money. There is a word or an acronym for this, and I can't think of it right now. I think it is either COB or CBO, where the powers that be make a decision about things like, how much is this going to cost us? Like, is it important for us to lose money? Like, how much money they're willing to sacrifice to make more money? Like, hey, is it worth us doing this if we're going to lose the money? And I feel like this situation is basically that, where you have a lot of things that are going to be happening in New Orleans in the next couple of months. And New Orleans is like a tourist destination. And if people do not want to come visit because they're scared of a possible attack or being harmed, they're not going to go. The same thing happened in Atlanta when the Super Bowl came here. They pushed all of the homeless folks out of the city. Like, they cleaned the city completely out. And I remember because at that time I was experiencing homelessness and I was living in a motel, and the program that I was in wasn't able to pay the price that the motel was asking for the week of the Super Bowl. So I had to go further out of Atlanta. And it's just a reminder of what type of world we live in, where capital is being protected at the end of the day. Nothing else matters other than making more money and exploiting working class folks. And this is a situation like this where they do not want to label this situation that happened as a, act of terror or any of that, because they do not want to cause panic with folks who are coming to visit. And, they have called it now. Like I said, they're naming it for what it is, but they were not in a rush to do it. Versus the conversation that happened with the CEO and how you had the mayor of New York walking the person who is being accused of the crime out, like doing a perp walk to the general public. Like, he was adamant about how this was an act of terror and how, you're not going to come and scare people. Luigi is now being charged with terrorism, like active terror, whatever, even though he's not a part of a group or organization, or like this just so one thing that he did. How the general public, how we are responding to it and how we are not mourning the wicked, for lack of better words, how we're not mourning the death of a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar insurance company for healthcare. Like, we generally do not care. And that is fucking with them. Like, for a lack of better words, they do not like the fact that we are all together on this. And they have tried to make an example of this man. Luigi's perp walk was all about how we reacted to the death of the CEO. The perp walk, everything about it, them charging him with terrorism and all of that was about protecting money, capital. At the end of the day, that this is not right. Don't you all get any ideas? Like, this is not how it's supposed to be. We're okay with a multi-billion-dollar company, an insurance company for healthcare, how they make profits out of denying people claims that are paying them for a service. We should just be okay with this. Like, we are okay with a company denying folks for a service, even though they're paying for it, finding loopholes to make more profits, to increase profits. This one person has lost their life who has been responsible for a lot of other folks' lives who were paying for this service. And, people were coming out and talking about how they've been denied claims, how their parents and their loved ones were being denied, care because of profits. Like, they're finding loopholes for things. And this is something that we are just okay with. This is something we're okay with and have just accepted. But now people are starting to think, like, you have all these people now coming out like saying we don't care and making fun of it. It is a conversation about how working class people are tired of getting the short end of the stick. And our politicians and all the folks we have elected to represent us don't want that type of conversation happening. And it's been really something to see Republicans who have been very supportive of folks who have harmed Black folks, who have done terrible things, and how they have gotten off and how they beat the system. The situation in New York City where the guy who felt threatened and had a Black man in a chokehold for probably like 10 minutes, like, he ended up losing his life. Inviting him to, speak and be at, political events and all the other stuff, like politicians reaching out to him and supporting him, and even the situation with the person who came out to threaten protesters with guns and stuff, like how he was embraced by the Republican Party as well as Donald Trump. Like, they had no issue having Republicans come on TV and, talking heads for the Republican Party come on TV each and every week during the election, say some of the most disgusting, vile things about Black folks, about Haitians, about immigrants, and all of these things. Like, I would call that terror. When Trump did that whole thing with talking about the immigrants eating the dogs and all the other stuff, they eating the cats and stuff, like, that stirred these white people to feel some type of way about immigrants. Every time an immigrant is on the news for doing something like harmful, they portray them as the spokesperson for the entire immigrant community. They use it in their campaign material all the time. Like, they have no issue invoking and installing fear with that. Like, they have no issue with that. All of that propaganda that we have seen over the years of how illegal aliens and how they're out here, immigrants are out here doing harmful stuff to us in the community. They're taking our jobs, all that propaganda around that. And, that leads to these people who are innocent, who have not done anything, being profiled. But they don't see it like that. But now you got folks not caring about this CEO. And now, like, the powers that be, they feel like, what's going on? Like, the fact that our elected officials don't know how we feel tells me that they are not really representing us. They can't be. If they don't understand how we feel, how can you represent us? How are you shocked that people do not care? And I don't want to hear this, this is not how we get things done. This is not how democracy works. Girl, Nobody in any institution in the United States of America can tell me about how things are done. Baby, y'all cannot. You can have all the propaganda you want. Baby, I know how y'all got this land and I know how y'all maintain it. So no politician can tell me about violence or any violence is not the answer. You're not going to tell me that because that was what America was built on. You're not going to tell me, you're not going to do the things and then tell us that's not. You're still doing the things. Violence is the answer. That is what you have promoted. And when we get into conversations about propaganda and all that other stuff, like this is a version of that, is that this is not a violent country. We're not violent. Like we are protecting our quote unquote freedom. And who gets to define what freedom is? Who gets to define what is terrorism? What is an act of terror? Because you saw one person be unalived, and now this is a act of terror, like because this one person, when people that this company worked for are responsible for the lives of a lot of their people, their customers, have no problem finding loopholes to keep them from spending money. So this is why universal health care matters. But we don't see any conversations about that anymore because our politicians are bought. Because companies like United and Cigna and everything else put money in politicians' pockets to keep stuff like that from happening. They put money in the campaigns of these politicians and stuff. They are paid for. So when we get into conversations and we talk about how the system is the same, this is a version of that because there was a conversation from a specific candidate about universal health care. We don't see any conversations about that anymore because these politicians are being paid. They're being bought. We don't have that type of influence. Yes, quote unquote, voting matters, but how big is your vote when a billionaire is able to buy his way into a seat next to the president of the United States? What does that say? Like, we're joking about Elon Musk being the president and Trump being the vice president or even the first lady, but this man has used his money to get influence to politicians. So when we get into conversations about these things, I want folks to understand because folks had a lot of smoke for people who were not interested in voting and not supporting this election process this year. I need for folks to understand because of things like this. Like, yes, we talk about the importance of voting, but we also need to talk about who has more power and more sway. Elon Musk is not the only billionaire that has the ear of like politicians like Trump. The fact that the term lobbyist even exists, where companies pay people to lobby for their company. Like, they pay somebody to be the middleman for them. Like, the person over the company, the CEO, can't talk, quote unquote, directly towards them and, influence stuff, but they can pay somebody to do it. They can pay somebody to talk about their agenda and what they want. We need to think about that. Like, these things exist and we have just been okay with because that is the natural, quote unquote, order of things, but it doesn't have to be. And the more people realizing that these things are way deeper than what we thought, that even if we are voting for said candidate and putting a person in a position to represent us, how a company can use a lobbyist or somebody else to influence them to vote another way. It happens each and every time. It is a real thing. Like, there is a reason why universal health care has fallen off. There's a reason why we're no longer talking about student loan debt like that, because these folks have been paid to shut up talking about that. The same way the tobacco industry influences politicians and stuff, the same way that, other companies have used lobbyists to get things off the table. Like, it's so much. There's a reason why these things happen. And it's not just because of votes. It's because of money and influence and power. Think about how the mass marketing of all of us needing to drink milk, like how that was in all of our schools. Like, you need to drink milk. You need to drink milk. The government did not care per se about the welfare of like people going to school. They didn't really care. If they did, they would be investing way more money in the education system, but the dairy industry was trying to make money and pushing propaganda, which celebrities participated in it as well. That, you know, the famous drink milk campaigns and all the other stuff that influences policies that benefit corporations, because now they have a never-ending check coming in. And I understand that these things are very difficult to see. And I think that is, as we talk about propaganda, that is some of the reasons why you don't see it, because we've been in this, that we have just accepted it. Like, this is the way things are supposed to be. You don't realize that it's propaganda. And two, it's oftentimes too late. Like, oh, that messaging worked, you know, and it is hard to unlearn some of these things. And it is difficult to recognize that our politicians are paid for. We want to believe in quote unquote democracy and, you know, you voting and all of that. Like, all of that is a version of propaganda, that your vote matters. Like, your one vote matters as much as the other person. But in truth, it's not as powerful as billion-dollar corporations who can be sitting next to the person who is supposed to be passing legislation or pushing legislation to protect us. If that was the truth, a lot of us agree that we need to be receiving more coin. Like, everybody felt like things were going right during the pandemic, as far as like folks were getting unemployment benefits and all of these things. Like, oh, so the government can pay us. They can pay us. Yes, they can provide these services and things. That's what we pay taxes for. The very idea of us doing a quote unquote favor for a company is supposed to be accommodating for us. Like, you need my labor. You need to pay me enough coin for me to live a comfortable lifestyle. You need me. But it's the other way around, where we feel as though we need it to survive. Like, we need it, and it should be they need it. We should be having legislation and things to protect us, protect even the consumers. Us even receiving text messages from the United States Postal Service that are spam text, us getting these millions of spam calls and text messages each and every year. It's not because legislation can't be passed to protect us. It's because someone is paying somebody to make sure we're able to get these text messages, because somebody's making money off of that. Because even though a lot of us ignore it, a lot of people are not. Think about our older generation who don't know what's going on when they get those text messages. They are not online like we are. They're not online like we are. They don't have that type of knowledge, and they may fall for it. It's the reason why, you know, seniors lose a lot of their money that they have saved up each and every year because of scams. Like, it is a real thing. And there is no legislation to protect these folks because someone is making money off of it. Somebody's being paid for it. Those are my thoughts. Like, I just paying attention to the Luigi situation and how it's been covered, and just watching how the law enforcement in New Orleans and the FBI did not want to consider this a act of terror or whatever, because they didn't, I feel as though they don't want to possibly not make folks interested in going to the Sugar Bowl as well as the Super Bowl coming up. They don't want folks to, you know, be fearful and not spend money, because at the end of the day, we live in a consumption-based economy. Like, we have to be spending money. Like, we are spending money that we don't have. That's how this economy works, that we are constantly going in debt to keep this shit afloat. Constantly going in debt to keep the economy. Like, we need to be out here spending money. That's why they did not want us at home during the pandemic. That's why they wanted us at work. They wanted us to get back out to spend money, because these companies will not make money if we're not spending any money. See how that works? It's really messed up. If you think about it, a lot of Americans, not everybody, because a lot of folks suffered, specifically Black folks and other minorities suffered during the pandemic, but a lot of other middle class, like families and things, were able to save money because they were not spending as much money. And, you know, again, a reminder of how our economy works is that we constantly need to be spending money, even if we don't need the things that we're spending money on. That's all I got. I know that was a lot. I apologize for that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll talk y'all later. Bye.